You have heard enough from me. I'm going to pass the floor to our first speaker. And I'm going to pass the floor to Samir. Again, he's the regional head of investments in Asia and EMEA. All right. And he's from Citigroup. And he's going to be talking to us on do work values actually matter during a job interview. But I know he's prepared way more than that. So I'm going to just pass the floor to Samir. Samir, are you ready?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I am going to start by sharing screen first.
Yeah.
Hopefully everybody sees it.
I can see.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you so much, Eileen. And completely resonate and all the work that we have done in the past. I know how passionate you feel about this.
Yes.
In 6 values, I'm sure we all know where you stand.
True.
So as you said, I think although I got kind of sort of the topic is do work values matter in an interview context? And, I do a fair amount of interviewing. But what I thought I would do is rather than make it a theoretical sort of a presentation, I thought what I would do is just talk to the audience about my experiences, what I have been doing, and there's a whole slew of different things that I've done in my career in my life, and then use that as a way of demonstrating how work values come into play, in an interview setting, but also in a work setting. So with that, I just kind of would start with a little bit of myself and my journey. I started my career about 25 years ago in India, short stint, and then moved to Australia. Again, relatively short stint. And then after that, I've settled here in Singapore now for about 17 years. So Singapore is definitely home for me. What did I do in India? Very quickly, I was part of what's called as corporate and institutional banking. So I was working with a lot of foreign investors. I was working with a lot of large and small corporates, managing trade finance, managing their payments, their receivables. So very much into investment banking. A lot of spreadsheeting, a lot of project finance, always to deal with lots and lots of money, if you will. Again, in those 6 value systems, I am very much into the economic subset, and that was always what attracted me. But what I did after this very short stint is I moved to Australia, and I did in Australia something that was totally different from my previous stint in banking, which is being part of the technology in the software industry, and that too working as a business development person, as a salesperson. I must admit it was a very humbling experience for me, but I'll talk more about that later. And then, as I said, I've settled here in Singapore. This is home for me. I am part of the wealth management industry right now. As you introduced, Eileen, I manage the investments business for Citi Wealth Management in both Asia and EMEA. But again, this was not just one role. My wealth management journey has a story of its own. So I started with the back office in operations processing, and then moved to a very specialized role. And now I'm not really in a specialized role. I'm more of a business manager. I manage my own profit and loss book. So with that said, what I do want to do is talk a little bit about my industry and what opportunities it affords people. I also want to talk a little bit about my role and what we do and what are the good things as well as what are the challenges in that role. And then I thought it would also help for me to talk some about my most recent previous role before my current role, because again, there was a little bit of learning for me in there. But before I do that, Eileen, can I request your help to put up my first poll question?
Yep, absolutely. Yep, it's coming up. So I'm gonna relaunch. Yeah, hope everybody can see this. So you should be able to see the question, the first poll question. And the first poll question is, wow, I see some people answering already. So I'll just, do you believe that vertical promotions is the only definition of a successful career? So first one is yes, I do. Second one is no, I don't. And the third category is neither, but I'm unsure. So, all right. So let me us know your choices. Okay. Okay. I think we have about 68% have already responded. That's cool. More than 70 have already responded. Okay. Any more? What about the rest? What do you think? Do you think that vertical promotions is the only definition of a successful career? What do you think? What do you think? Okay. I think we have a couple more votes. I'm going to end the poll and then share the results with the crowd. Yep. I think because we've already with more than 80%, 84% who have responded. So I'm going to close. Okay. So here's the results. Okay. You should be able to see on screen. All right. Everybody can see that on screen?
Yes. Brilliant. I think, Eileen, it seems like I am going to speak to the converted, but there's a few of us here on the session that are either not sure or feel it's really, the vertical promotions are the only definition of a successful career. Clearly, promotions and going up vertically in a hierarchy is very important. But the hierarchy is what it is, right? It's a pyramid, starts with a very broad base and it starts to kind of go up. There's only one CEO. You can't have CEOs. So very interesting. Great to hear this thought process. And
okay, so I've stopped share and so we can see your deck now.
Excellent. Okay, so
nice.
I think, okay, got it. So as I mentioned, I regionally manage our investments business. But what exactly is wealth management? What's this industry that I'm part of now for the past 17 years? I did want to spend some time talking to all of you about it because I passionately believe it's a growth industry and it's something that everyone should consider. Put up a couple of charts here. I know lots of numbers and very small font, so no quizzes on what's in those charts. But what I wanted to say is if you see these charts, both on the left and the right, over the last 6 or 7 years, the one clear pattern we are seeing is that the number of rich people in Asia is growing. Not only that, the wealth they have is also growing. So, for example, in 2012, across Asia Pacific, there were 3.7 million what's called as high net worth individuals, just let's say rich people. That grew from 3.7 to 6.5 by the time it was 2019. So nearly double. Similarly, these rich people in 2012, they had 12 trillion dollars of wealth. That's gone to 22 trillion in 2019. So again, massive increase, right? And what that speaks to is really that this is a really big market, okay? And then what I did, just for the benefit of those of you who are not familiar with wealth management, is I picked up from the MAS website a few pointers as to how they view Singapore as a wealth management center. And so 2 or 3 things. One, it's the number 2 international center globally, both in terms of how competitive it is and the performance that it's generating. Not quite in size terms yet, but in terms of ability, Singapore is really up there with the best. And often, Singapore is compared to Switzerland, which was the original wealth management center for the rich and the famous, maybe 30, 40 years ago, right? Similarly, here in this region, clearly we are the most preferred offshore wealth management hub, which means people who have, people in mainland China, people in Indonesia, people in Malaysia, people in the Philippines, people in India, people from Dubai. A lot of those people want to manage their wealth out of accounts in Singapore. They prefer to have their banking and wealth management relationships here in Singapore. And so no wonder over the last 2 or 3 years, the number of family offices, as an example, of dedicated wealth management firms has just skyrocketed, right? So it's a very positive outlook, I would say, for the industry here in Singapore. And why that is, because if you think about us Asians, we all love real estate. Right? I am yet to meet anybody from this region who says I don't like real estate. Okay, a lot of our wealth is in real estate, but alongside real estate, we also want to protect and grow our wealth. And many of us would either invest in funds or what's called as ETFs or bonds, or the more sophisticated amongst us would invest in derivatives. All of this really can't be done if you're managing your own career, your own, either you're self-employed or you work somewhere. That takes precedence for you for the most part. So you need somebody to come in and help you to, manage your wealth, either protect it or grow it, whichever way you look at it, right? So as the wealth in this region grows, the need for wealth manager also grows. That's why the wealth management industry is very big here. That's why it has seen rapid growth. Yes, admittedly, it has also seen some consolidation, but on a longer term trend basis, I think Singapore is very well placed structurally to manage all of this rising wealth in Asia. Okay. And then having talked about wealth management, let's try and sort of talk about what is it that I do. I believe it's the best job in the world. So I do want to share a little bit about that. Me and my team, we typically on a typical day, my day starts with Bloomberg, it ends with Bloomberg. We're always looking to understand what market trends there are going around, which parts of the market, which part of risk assets would grow. We also try to understand where risk is building up in markets. And using all of that, we try to generate and source investment ideas for our clients. We also do a fair amount of due diligence on those ideas, meaning if somebody presents us with an investment idea, we don't just bat our eyelid and say, yes, we'll invest money. We conduct a lot of our due diligence to understand whether those ideas are meaningful. We also do a lot of training because, as you would expect, this is a very specialized area and not a lot of people are experts in it. So we do undertake fair amounts of training. Most of that training we undertake is internal, which means it is to our own country teams, our own relationship managers, and so on and so forth. And importantly, as I said, manage risks and controls. All of that is really what me and my team do. On a day-to-day basis, we work with many country teams, and that's really one of the most exciting parts of my job. Is, as I like to say, in the East, my day starts with Australia, and then immediately after Korea, and then China, and my day towards the later part of the day, it's countries like India and Dubai that kick in. And then later on in the evening, I'm usually talking to my colleagues in Poland and Russia, or the UK, right? So from Australia in the East all the way to Poland in the West, many different countries I keep talking to. And as I said, really that is one of the exciting parts of my job. I don't know of many other jobs here in Singapore where you're not only talking to Singaporeans all the time, but also Taiwanese and Hong Kongese and Australians and Russians and so on. So the perspective that they give you and the way they enrich your perspective on life, it's just amazing. Okay, and then these guys, our country teams in turn, they will work with our specialists and relationship managers, who in turn work with our clients. Okay, so that's my current role. A very brief mention of what I did previously. Again, what I did before this role was very different. And obviously I'm a banker, so one of the things that I did in the past was understand banking. And what I mean by that is understand, how the bank's balance sheet is constructed. What are the bank's assets? What are the bank's liabilities? As a bank, we keep taking deposits from clients. We invest those deposits with other clients as loans. So understanding that, understanding with our treasury teams how we as a bank must meet with all the different regulatory requirements that are imposed on us, not just here in Singapore, but across the region. And then making sure that every bit of money that we are getting in from clients as deposits, we're putting it to good use. So again, it wasn't something that I've done ever before, and this was a really eye-opening stint for me. The other thing I did, obviously, was FX. I used to manage our foreign exchange business. And for those of us who are uninitiated, why should we care about FX? A lot of people ask this question to me. And really, the answer is, number one, I feel that we are all increasingly becoming global citizens. We either have friends or family members, or we want travel or whatever other reasons. We're increasingly interconnected, between one country to the other. And so that's why FX is important. We often want to buy assets overseas, whether it's real estate, whether we want to send our kids to, education overseas. Therefore, having a keen eye for foreign exchange and currencies is important. And, not being sort of ashamed about it, FX also gives you an opportunity to make money because it is a source of expressing your, speculation and your views on how different markets are going to move. So that's really what I used to do before my current role. Again, not something I've done many times before, but something that I definitely enjoy. I think at this stage, Eileen, I would sort of request for the second poll question. If you could please help to bring that up.
Yep, I think everybody should be able to see this question on screen. And the question is, looks like no need to read, but I'm going to read anyway. If you're doing well in your job, should you take a risk and change job? Wow, very interesting. Wow. Okay, we have almost half the crowd have responded already. Almost half. Yep. More than half. What about the rest? What do you think? First one is, yep. Yes, I will take the risk and change jobs. Second one is, nope. Since I've got, I'm doing well, why change, right? And then, of course, we all know there's two schools of thought. That's why we want to hear what's your thought. And neither, right? I'm unsure. Yeah. So you see, herein lies, different preferences as well. We've got maybe a few more of you who have not responded, just a handful. Let's see, what are your choices? Okay. Do we want to end the poll? Maybe I can end the poll, yeah? Are we okay on this? Yeah, okay, cool. So I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So everybody should be able to see this on screen. Okay, so this is what you have here. Yay, the jury is in. The jury is in. Here's the result from the crowd.
So Eileen, with this one, certainly I have a little bit of convincing to do because the majority feels that they shouldn't change their jobs if they're already doing well. Hopefully at the end of my session, they would change their minds.
Yes. I think there's also another school of thought that says, you should always change when you're at the peak of your career and then leave them with good memories. But okay, so I'll pass it back to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I will just start my screen share. Okay, so as I reflect on my career, over the last 2.5 decades, one of the things that pops up in my mind really as a very big influence on my career is my stint in Sydney. And I have to be honest, when I came into Singapore and I started making friends here amongst Singaporeans, a lot of people actually were bold enough and blunt enough to tell me that I was a fool. If I had an opportunity to live in Australia, in Sydney, I shouldn't have come to Singapore. And I still look back and laugh on them because, it's all about what you gain out of, work that you do. But my stint in Sydney was very interesting. And this photo here really encapsulated it all in many ways.
I like it. I like it. That's
So
the reality.
it, it was, yes. So what did I do really? I moved to Sydney from India. I was in a very cushy job in India. As I said, I used to be in the corporate and institutional bank. My income was growing 20-25% in a year. When I picked up the phone and I wanted to speak to anybody, I was in Citibank at the time. Uh, Absolutely no problem, getting my way around either in corporate life or in personal life. But I ended up not only changing my jobs, I ended up changing the country. As I mentioned, moving from India to Australia, I ended up changing my industry. Again, as I mentioned, I went from banking into software and technology. And mind you, this was for those of us who have been around that long, this was just after the dot-com boom had crashed. So about 2001, thereabouts, just in the first year of the new millennium. And I know today many of you look upon startup roles with a lot of excitement and fancy. So this was a little bit of a startup role. I was really the first and the only employee for that firm in Australia. And in many ways, it was a jet setting role. I was on the plane literally every day, flying between Sydney and Melbourne. I was visiting pretty much all of the main cities in Australia, whether it's Brisbane, whether it's Melbourne, whether it's Perth, all the time. I used to fly into New Zealand to meet clients and prospects literally like once a month. So in that sense, a lot of people sort of feel good about having a traveling job and, jet setting everywhere. So I had that sort of a job. But on the other hand, I was also, obviously head of the business. I was hired to start up the business there. But literally, I was also the janitor. If somebody came to meet me or visit me in the office, there was nobody else to, make that cup of tea or cup of coffee. It was myself, me, myself, and that's it.
And
So
wash the cups too.
what's the exactly, yes. So that was a very interesting experience, especially coming from a country in Asia where many of us are not used to doing these things. Where you have cheap labor outside in Asia, you always have hired help to do a lot of the things for you. You have drivers, you have people to do office work, you have whatever, right? So this was a little bit of a change in mindset and experience for me, and one that I believe did a world of good, to my career and my way of approaching work, from there on, right? So was I successful? Was it a good stint? It was about a 4 or 5 year stint, and yes, I mean, if you just think about, I was a sales guy, and if you just think about numbers, yeah, probably I didn't do such a bad job. It was okay. We started with zero revenue, and we ended. By the time I left, we were having a run rate of about a million and a half. So at least there was something there. But clearly, it was a slow burn. 3-4 years to kind of generate business isn't something that I was terribly happy about. So what did I learn from it? It wasn't a total disaster. It wasn't an unequivocal success. It was somewhere in between. But my biggest achievement was, I started understanding the difference between a personal value add and the firm's value add. So what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, today I work with Citi. In the previous role when I started my career, also I worked with Citi. And as part of that role, when I picked up the phone to speak to a client or a prospect, almost nobody could ever say, no, I don't want to meet you. It was always about when should we meet and should it be lunch or dinner or drinks or what have you, right? But for this startup firm, I don't know how many times I had to hear, please don't call us, we'll call you, kind of messages from my prospects, right? So I began to understand how much the personal value add becomes important in situations like this, which wasn't very clear to me in my previous stint. So that's one. Second, I began to understand how tough it is really to sell something to somebody, right? To live through all the objections, to have a thick enough skin to not, feel bad when somebody is saying no to you, and to have the resilience and the perseverance to keep pushing at it. My first sale was all of $20,000, and many of other people that I know would have said, "Hey, no point, working for $20,000." But it's those $20,000 that suddenly led to $100,000 sale, and then it led to more and more, and eventually to $1 million sale, which was really at the time for our company one of the largest orders that they had received from anywhere in the world. So this whole concept of how tough it is to sell is something that I learned. I did not learn it with Citi because, as I said again, a lot of Citi's brand value comes in when I'm working for Citi, right? Another thing I learned is, and this is probably true, and many of you who are in sales would probably resonate with it. Come victory or defeat, life moves on. And what I mean by that is there were many occasions where I actually cracked a deal, I won the deal, and that made me feel elated. And there were many occasions when I lost a deal. It was my colleague or my friend or some other competitor who got the deal. I learned that either ways, I need to dust myself off and move on, so that the next day starts from zero again, and not brood over the past or not gloat over success. That's really something which hit me in this stint. Then a couple of other things. One, I realized how important it was to build a network of supporters. And I kid you not, through those 4 or 5 years, I had a lot of lows. But when I quit that job and I was moving on to the next one, the number of people who came out to me proactively saying, "Oh, look, we want you to work with us." In many ways, I think that was what I felt was my achievement more than the work itself, because some of those are still my network of supporters. I still rely on them either as mentors or as friends, or as people who give me insight about what's going on in the market. So I think that was really, really important. And then last but not least, what I learned is one of the reasons I felt I wasn't really all that successful in this job was because I didn't love it enough. And I learned that it is very important for you to do a job that you truly love. And I described my previous job as the best job in the world because I truly believe in it. And it's that passion which helps me overcome all the stresses and the challenges of that job. Okay, so this is something I learned again from my stint in Sydney. After that stint, just reflecting on some other aspects of my career and journey, as I said, after Sydney, I came to Singapore, and that's when my wealth management journey started. And it didn't start with my current job, and there was no straight path for me from where I started to right now. Okay, so I started in what was a back office function, and again, in the Asian context and generally speaking in our industry, people tend to look down a little bit on back office functions or operations functions. It is assumed that these are not, sort of jazzy roles. They don't always involve whining and dining. They are very much staid, sober roles, 8 to 6, and keep doing the same thing again and again. That's where I started, and I'll talk a little bit about that, and then how my journey started and transitions happened. Why I took this job up, even though I was a sales guy, it was a front office job that I did before. I took this job because, as I said, I wanted to exit the tech industry. It wasn't that I was doing poorly. It was okay. Wasn't great shakes, but it was okay. But I took a conceptual decision that I wanted to exit the tech industry and get back into banking because that is what I love. And so when I decided that, I did not mind taking 2 steps back and going into a role that I otherwise may not have liked to go into. But I did it. And what it did then is gave me the opportunity to learn about wealth management from a relatively safe environment. And what I mean by that is I wasn't sitting in front of clients talking about investment ideas at that stage. I was sitting in a back office learning about what sort of investment ideas are working, what is the meaning of a derivative product, how risky it is, yada, yada, yada. So being able to learn about the industry, but from a relatively safe environment, that paid wonders to my career in subsequent years. Okay? I also developed a very keen sense of pragmatism because oftentimes people who are always only working sort of with concept and abstract ideas, they don't know what it takes to get things done. And in a back office job, you're always concerned with what does it take to do things, right? It's all about execution. And so I developed that very keen sense of pragmatism, which still serves me in very good light. Last but not least, doesn't matter whichever industry you're in, wealth management or shipping, or we have speakers from various other sort of parts of the corporate life. In any given industry, I think it is super important that people learn the importance of controls and risk, because without that, uh, uh, it's practically impossible for you to rise up in your career. Any senior manager today in any industry has to be aware of what risks his businesses are running and whether he's comfortable with those risks. Okay, so this role taught me all that, and therefore is helping me today. And then how did I transition? As I mentioned, I started with the back office, and then 2007, 8, 9 happened. Again, for some of us who go back to that period, was a really, really tough period. City stock trades today at $60, $70, that range. That stock went down to $1 at one point in time. We didn't know if we would ever have a job, and it wasn't just Citi. If I had to go somewhere else, any other bank on the street was facing tremendous pressure. So it was very industry wide, not just my employer. Oh my God, that was a terrible time, I think, in many of our careers. Right? And so my growth stalled, right? Obviously, because those 2-3 years, everybody was just focused on survival. Right? Nobody was thinking about growth. And so what I decided to do then was reskill myself. And I studied for these two courses that I've put on the slide, the CFA and the CAIA. CFA stands for the Chartered Financial Analyst, and CAIA stands for Chartered Alternative Investment Analyst. So these are two designations that are very much gold standard in my industry, and I decided to study for it, and I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to be able to pass and get those degrees. Right? And so my perseverance paid off, because I was trying from 2007 onwards to make a change in my career. And it was finally at the end of 2010, so almost after 4 years, that I was able to make that break and move on into a more front office type of role. And there's a little story there that I want to share with you, which I will come to in a moment. And how I was able to actually make a move from my ops role into a sort of product role. But the question I had in my mind was, did I do the right thing? And why I had this question is because I have to say, at this point in time, I was doing reasonably well in my career, and my managers were talking about growth for me, and managing director titles, bigger teams to manage, yada yada yada. And again, I made a break and changed direction completely. It was like a 180-degree switch because this is what I wanted to do. I did not want to remain in the back office function. I felt I had learned enough and I wanted to move on. And so I stuck to my guns in terms of what I wanted to do. What I'm doing today, as I talked earlier, I do manage investments, but before that I managed the balance sheet and foreign exchange without having any prior experience in either of these functions. And what I wanted to say here is, when I started my career long ago, in the corporate and institutional banking space, I had a strong desire to become an FX trader. I don't know why I had that mindset. When I was young, all of us have certain, things that are embedded in our head. I thought the most exciting job in the world was to be an FX trader. And for some reason, as my career progressed, I never got a chance to do that. Very briefly, I worked with Standard Chartered for about a week. That's all, in that sort of an FX trader role. But things didn't quite work out for a variety of reasons. But as luck would have it, when I became the FX head, there was a team of FX traders and FX options traders that I managed. And in my current role as well, there's a team of fixed income traders, etc., that are in my team. And so the reason I'm saying this is because if you persevere enough and you're doing all the right things, it's like the universe around you, works towards making things happen for you, right? And eventually you tend to end up getting to your goals one way or another, right? And that's basically what happened to me. It wasn't through any accident. It wasn't through any design. It was almost through accident. Okay, so I'll move on. Again, some thoughts as I reflect on my career. I said there's a story I wanted to share with you. I do think it's important because it's something that had a lot of impact on my career. So again, CFA and CAIA, these are not easy things to do. I was running a 12-hour day at my workplace, and after I came back home, I used to spend an hour, maybe 2 hours, trying to study and reskill on both of these courses. I completed these courses not when I was very young, probably towards my late 30s. So again, as you get on with age, it is relatively more difficult, not impossible, but relatively more difficult to keep focusing for long periods of time. Right? However, I enjoyed the challenge a lot. And I really felt doing this was a true test of whether I really loved the subject. And I go back to my earlier discussion where I said it's important that you do things that you love, because if you don't, then you will never give your best. Right? And so from my perspective, the fact that I was enjoying going through that rigor, sitting at the National Library from 9 in the morning to 9 in the evening, reading up books instead of being on a vacation somewhere, that told me I really loved it. I couldn't have done it without the love for the subject. And I knew this was going to be a lifelong usage. It was not a 1 year or 2 year use, right? Once you get your CFA or your CAIA, you can use them forever. And so that was important as well. And then I've mentioned you're lucky enough to have a mentor. I couldn't plan this, but as it turned out, the CFA Institute in Singapore ran weekend courses for people like me, people like us who were working and so didn't have 100% time to be a student. And at that time, one of the lecturers who was the head of the CFA Society in Singapore at the time, a very well-known Singaporean, he's part of the COVID recovery task force that the government has instituted. He's the CEO of a fairly big commodities firm here in Singapore. It's just that through my interactions with him, he started to understand what talent I had, my liking for this subject and so on and so forth. And he helped me of his own volition. He actually, after I became a CFA, he wrote a note to Citi's senior management, 2 or 3 people who were pretty senior at the time, and recommended me. And he said, look, this guy is my best student. And if you have a job, please give him a chance. Now, I don't know where that happens today's world, but he stuck his neck out, and I'm truly grateful to him for that. And that's how, that was one of the lucky moments for me after, whatever I did, for me to sort of, move into a investments role, if you will, back, I think, about 8, 9 years ago, right? And I'm still in touch with that person, and I still consider him my mentor. But it was this one good turn which moved my career, I think, quite significantly. Okay. Again, not that I could have planned this, but if I had not taken the risk of doing CFA and CIA, then I would not have met this person, and I would not have had, the opportunities that I subsequently got. And then, Eileen, I just stop here for a minute before I, go into a slightly different topic. Perhaps a time for another poll question.
Yep, I have it on screen right now. So it's the third poll question on hobbies. Yeah. How important is it for you? Yeah. How important is it for your career that you find meaningful hobbies outside of your career? Yes. So more than 80% of the time, between 60 to 80, 40 to 60, 20 to 40, or less than 20%. I think we are seeing some inputs already. Um, that's like almost half of you have responded, right? Do we have more coming in? I think we have some more coming in. Okay, let's see. How important is it that you have meaningful hobbies? I know I have. I have hobbies that I like. I turn my hobby into my company. Truly, truly just love what I do. It's not that it's any easy at all, but it's fun. Okay, I think we've got like, close to 80% who have responded. Shall we close? Let's get on with this. Yes. And you're coming close to your time too.
Yes, yes, I
So
have only a
let me
couple of
just
minutes.
yeah, no worries. Let me just share the results. Yeah. Here's the result. Woohoo.
Wow, okay. 60% feel that more than 60% of the time you have to uh, find more meaningful hobbies outside your career. That's brilliant. Excellent. So then the rest of what I'm going to talk about will certainly resonate with everyone. Again, I'll probably be speaking to the converted, but all the same, for those of you who haven't either responded or don't feel that hobbies have an important role to play in your career,
Sorry.
absolutely. Okay, sure. So what I wanted to say before I know I have only 5 minutes, I'll keep it short. I feel that we Asians, and in particular we Singaporeans, we are among the hardest working people that there ever will be. It's just that's how we are built. I don't know why, but that's how we are built. If you go to Europe, if you go to the US, you go to Australia, you will find that people generally, as a cultural aspect, there is work only has a little bit of role to play. There's a lot of other things that are very natural into their lives, but it's not true. I don't think it's true for large tracts of us here. And so it is really important, therefore, for us to not burn out. We have pretty long, big careers. It's not a 10-year game. It's a 20, 30, 40-year game for many of us. And so that's why it's really important for us to redefine ourselves, reinvent ourselves every now and again, and to change with times, right? You can't do that if you're burnt out, if you're feeling tired about stuff. So for me, what is it that worked for me? How do I keep myself ticking? One, I picked up a couple of years ago the challenge of trying to complete Spartan races, more to challenge myself, not anything else. So muddy, very very tough, picking up weights, but enjoying it. That's what mattered to me. Second, widening my social horizon. So I made so many friends through this whole exercise. Started doing fitness groups, people from all walks of life. Young, old, middle age, everybody, right? And you keep in touch with them. You enjoy after the Spartan, so on and so forth. It's a totally different perspective, from my banking community that I kind of usually associate with. uh, None of these guys are bankers, thankfully, and so I feel that was one way for me to kind of extend my career and make sure that every day when I go into work, I am enjoying myself. Right. Second, again, unusual thing for what most people say, but for me it was really really important. Is one of the best decisions of my life was to join the armed forces and become a volunteer cop. I know many Singaporeans find that very hard to believe because the NS is really something that is a conscription, whereas I volunteered. I had many reasons to do that, but one of them was to really give back into society, which I feel is really, really important. As I told all of you guys, there was some one person who was my sponsor and who did a good turn to me, and which helped my career and my life. And so I thought a lot about wanting to give back. But importantly, it's also a big, big learning for me, right? Because again, for some of you, you have been through the national service system, right? We have this SAR 21. You have to assemble it and then deassemble it in 60 seconds, and the faster you do it, the better you are, right? So to be able to not do those things on time, and all the other young people doing it much faster than you, it is a very humbling experience. In my work life, I have an assistant who will set up my meetings, who will call people for me. A lot of things get done for me, right? Over here, I'm cleaning my rifle myself, right? So I found that to be a very, very useful experience. Not to mention, it's also a sort of free sort of fitness motivator, because every one of these guys that I meet in the army, they're all very, very fit. And I am therefore forced to take action myself. And in many ways, it becomes a stress buster for me, right? It's a stress buster par excellence. And some of these photos that I've put on there, these are all friends that I got through the buddy system in the army. And so, again, invaluable and precious friendships, widening my social horizon and enriching my life, and therefore enriching my career. So I'm going to stop there, Eileen. I'm sorry I extended, but
Oh no, not at all. I mean, I didn't want, the audience to miss this last slide, because when I first met you, and we had long conversations and all that, and then when Samir sent me, photographs of him doing the Spartan, I'm like, whoa, okay, that's one. But then later on, when he sent me photographs of him being in the army uniform, I was like, wait a minute, Samir, haven't you got enough challenges? And that's what I noticed about you. You demonstrate your values, and definitely economic cluster is one clear-cut value, because I can see that, when you talk about that, you speak with such verbal. So that's great. Yeah, but you care for the society as well, which is admirable.